November 5th, 1979, was an otherwise quiet Monday night in the rural, wooded area of Punta Gorda, Florida. However, all normalcy shattered when, at approximately 1:40 a.m., an on-duty deputy, checking out what he said was simply a suspicious vehicle, radioed Charlotte County Sheriff's Dispatch and reported that he had coincidentally happened upon a grisly homicide. The Charlotte County Sheriff's Office Road Patrol deputy, named John J. Greer, reported that the body had been found inside a locally known shop, part of a chain called the Farm Store, located off of Highway 17 and North Washington Loop Road, a road which meanders through creeks and wooded areas and is an area frequented by locals and tourists alike, exploring the nearby waters of Charlotte Harbor. Deputy Greer reported that the killer had escaped with a paltry sum of $7.34 from the store's till. As officers responded to the scene, they soon learned the victim was a 25-year-old woman named Adele Marie Easterly, an assistant manager of the farm store. She had been shot twice with a 12-gauge shotgun, once in the back and once in the head. No bullet casings were found. Numerous people in and around Adele's life were interviewed, and while some were considered potential suspects, no evidence nor information was developed that would establish any solid leads. Initially, some suspected that the deputy, John J. Greer, might have been involved because he had a sordid reputation and lived in the area. The store was located just 5 miles from his Port Charlotte home. He also had a reputation amongst deputies for being, quote, creepy. While the sheriff's office investigators and commanders believed he could be responsible for Adele's death, they lacked substantial evidence to back up their suspicions. Suspicions were already aroused due to an earlier death associated with Greer. Just over 70 days before the murdered store clerk was happened upon by the deputy, he had called in another dead body. This time, it had been the body of his wife. Just 2 months prior, on August 27, 1979, Greer had called the sheriff's office and reported that his wife, Jackie Greer, had shot herself in their home in Port Charlotte. Greer was off duty at the time and told responding deputies that he was sleeping and heard a pop and saw smoke coming from a closet before finding Jackie Greer dead inside with what he said was smoke coming from a hole in her chest. An investigation was completed, and although investigators suspected something was not right about the incident, there was no evidence to prove the case was anything other than suicide. 320 days later, another female acquaintance of Greer was found dead, this time while sitting in her Ford Mustang in a wooded area of Port Charlotte. Her husband had reported her missing on September 20th, 1980, and her body was found on September 29th. The cause of death was undetermined, but it was suspected that she'd overdosed on pills, as empty pill bottles were found in the car. Her body was far too decomposed to determine the cause of death. However, no signs of trauma were noted. The unnamed woman left behind a suicide note that investigators said appeared to be legitimate. Shockingly, the victim's husband told the sheriff's department that Deputy John Greer had been following his wife around town and was coming to their house while on duty. The deceased's husband said in no uncertain terms that Greer had been attempting to have sexual relations with his wife. It is thought that it was this third dead body connected to Greer that triggered an internal investigation of the deputy. Greer was suspended on October 3, 1980 at 10 a.m. and resigned on that same day, while officially under investigation for undisclosed activities. Unsurprisingly, while Greer's search for power was temporarily deterred, the private nature of the Internal Affairs investigation of him did not preclude him from quote-unquote serving the public, and he went on to work in several other law enforcement agencies, including police and sheriff's departments, most near the west coast of Florida. He was also a pilot and held a variety of pilot and aircraft-related positions in and around Kingsport, Tennessee, in the ensuing decades. Years passed, and no one was ever arrested in the shooting of Jackie Greer, in the murder of Adele Easterly, or in the suicide of the unnamed woman of Greer's affection, who was found dead in her car. In 1986, 6 years after Greer resigned, a friend of the slain store clerk, Adele, provided critical information to investigators. She told investigators she had not come forward previously because, quote, she was afraid of a deputy. The unnamed outcry friend told police that the 25-year-old had been dating a Charlotte County deputy who would visit her at the farm store. He would come during the night shift, and she said he would bring his gun to, as he had put it, quote, protect her. This friend recalls Adele told her she became aware the deputy she was involved with was married, which was news to the young woman who had been dating him, assuming he was previously single. This friend believed that at the time Adele was killed, she was trying to break up with the deputy. The friend went on to say that Adele was, quote, definitely afraid of him. Detectives later learned that Greer carried a double-barreled 12-gauge shotgun in his patrol car, the same gauge bullet that killed Adele. In those days, it was common for deputies to carry personal shotguns or rifles in their patrol vehicles. This type of gun does not eject bullet casings, similar to the gun used at the scene, as no casings were found. The anonymous friend, relating what she had heard from Adele, also said that she knew the true story surrounding Greer's wife's death in August of 1979. She said that what had really happened was that the deputy had told his wife that he wanted a divorce, and in response, Jackie Greer took his service revolver and tried to shoot herself. According to Adele's friend, Greer then told Adele that he had fought his wife for the gun, causing it to go off and killing her. This was contrary to the story he had told deputies regarding hearing a pop while sleeping and finding his wife in the closet, dead, the wound still emanating smoke from the gunshot. With this new information in hand, in November of 1986, detectives requested that a crime scene investigator with blood spatter training examine Greer's wife's death scene. An investigator from the Broward County Sheriff's Office examined the scene but could not determine if her death was suicide or homicide. However, he did determine that the death could not have occurred in the manner Greer described, as Greer told responding deputies that he was sleeping and heard a pop. He then claimed that he jumped out of bed and frantically looked for his wife before coming upon a closed closet door with smoke coming out. He opened the door and said that he found his wife was in the closet and had been shot. Chemicals to detect blood were used, and no blood spatter was found on the inside of the door. However, there was evidence of blood in the door jamb, which would prove the closet door was open at the time of the shooting. When the friend of Adele was asked by the detective about John Greer specifically, Adele's friend said she believed that was the name of the deputy Adele was seeing. The farm store was in a policing zone that Greer worked very often during the midnight shift. Police felt it was worth noting in their report that no other deputy lost a wife to suicide or homicide in that time period. In 2009, cold case detectives featured the Adele Easterly case on the Charlotte County Sheriff's Unsolved Cases website, and in doing so, they purposely released more information than normal, with the hope that someone with knowledge of this crime might respond. The posting of this update paid off because the detectives received information that a former sheriff's office explorer had knowledge about John Greer. According to their website, the goal of the Sheriff's Explorers program is to, quote, educate and involve the community's youth in police operations and to educate them in law enforcement functions. Cold case detectives arranged an interview with this former child explorer and learned she had been sexually assaulted numerous times by Greer while he was a deputy, and that he had specifically threatened to kill her. During one assault, she vividly recalls that Greer told her to, quote, ask them dead bitches like Adele Easterly what happened when they say no to me. The explorer was working in the dispatch center the night Adele Easterly was found dead in the farm store. She said that she observed Greer drive into the sheriff's office complex and continue to the east side of the building before entering. The east side was the sheriff's entrance, where the locker room was located. The deputy entrance was typically on the west side. Greer entered the east side door, and the explorer saw him with what appeared to be a long gun in his hand, and she calls he looked disheveled. She also noticed that one of his gloves was off and that he had something on his bare hand that could have been blood. Greer was known to wear black gloves while on duty. When Greer saw her, he either motioned or told her to get back into dispatch. She recalls that after a few minutes, he drove from the east side of the building to the west and then came back inside. She said that he looked like he had just showered. Cold case detectives started searching for any other victims or witnesses that could add information to support a criminal charge. And while detectives interviewed several past employees and explorers in the sheriff's office, and additional information obtained supported some of the statements of the victim and the explorer, no charges were filed, and Greer would not be formally interviewed for over a decade. In 2019, a woman came forward to report that Mr. Greer had sexually assaulted her when she was a teenager, working as a dispatcher in the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office back in 1979. After she came forward, little changed or developed. Detectives say they tried to create enough probable cause to arrest Mr. Greer, and according to the Sheriff's Office, once detectives obtained as much evidence and information as possible, an interview with Greer was supposedly attempted. But despite the fact that detectives confirmed the department was aware of Greer's location, and the fact that he was monitored as much as possible over the years, it was only when investigators learned that he had moved into an extended care facility that they finally confronted the aged former officer. Cold case detectives finally arrived at the elderly living facility located in Kingsport, Tennessee, in April of 2023. There, they spoke to him as he lay in a bed. The department's report details that Greer was bedridden and could only give short answers to questions. It also notes he was unable to feed himself and barely able to speak. He appeared to understand questions, they said, but could not carry on long conversations. When asked directly if he shot Adele Easterly and his wife, Mr. Greer answered, short of breath, and confessed to investigators that he'd killed not just one, but 2 women. Adele was not the only woman whose life was cut short, Mr. Greer said, as he also admitted he had shot his wife, Jackie Greer, at their home in Port Charlotte, Florida. Cold case detectives could not confirm whether Greer had shot his wife, Jackie, intentionally or if it was an accident, as he had previously told Adele Easterly, the woman who he shot 2 months later. It was determined that Greer would never be well enough to stand trial. Cold case detectives determined his health was seriously compromised and that he would most likely never leave the care center. As a result of this determination, detectives did not arrest Mr. Greer, believing his failing health would have made his extradition to Florida difficult, and that the case would have been a coin toss at trial, with no physical evidence and only one witness, with hearsay, linking Mr. Greer to the murder. Mr. Greer died nearly a year later, on March 2, 2024. He was 77, a far riper age than any of his victims were allowed to reach. Those critical of the investigation's handling say that, in light of the new evidence, Greer should have been questioned further regarding his wife and regarding the unknown suicide of the woman he was pursuing in 1980, especially when already under the shadow of suspicion from admitting to his guilt in the death of Adele Easterly. Finally, on the last day of the year of 2024, the Sheriff's Office officially released that the investigation into Adele's murder had been closed. Detective spokesperson Grandy explained to the media that information about the confession had not been made public earlier because the office was contacting other law enforcement agencies in the South to see if Greer might be connected to other crimes. The outcome has left Adele's remaining family torn. Jessica Kilborn, Adele's niece, who was just 5 when her aunt was killed, said that she was grateful for the work of the cold case detectives, but believed that, quote, the ball was dropped after her aunt was killed because the sheriff's office knew that Mr. Greer was a, quote, shady kind of character, and yet did nothing. Jessica mused on the bittersweet nature of the outcome of the case. She said, quote, we have a name. It will never be closure. It's not because I don't have my aunt here. My dad doesn't have his only sibling. My grandparents never lived long enough to even see this moment. Detective Gandy, on behalf of the department, admitted that it was frustrating Greer had never been brought to justice and told the media and the public that, quote, it's very disappointing that we didn't get to arrest him and have him stand trial, but it's also good to be able to close the case and give the family some answers. I'm sorry we couldn't have done more. The sheriff's office says that it still wants to know if there were additional victims of Greer's. The cold case unit will continue the investigation into Greer to determine if he was or could have been involved with any other violent crimes in Florida or other states. Anyone who has been affected or has knowledge of the crimes of former Deputy Greer can contact the Charlotte Cold Case Unit at area code 941-575-5361, or if after hours, you can call area code 941-639-2101. If you like what we do and want to see more, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much to our patrons. If you would like to support this channel, you can visit the link in our bio below.